The X-Men and SHIELD were in a panic because of Professor Charles's sudden coma, but Lindsay became conscious thanks to Professor Charles's telepathic ability. "Professor Charles, are you still there? Professor Charles?" Lindsay asked twice, but there was no response from the empty house, and the question did not even appear in his mind, so he felt relieved. Just now, a fragment of memory that was not in the game plot suddenly appeared in his mind, and then Professor Charles, who said he would help Kikai recover his memory, fell silent. Did he retire after achieving his goal? Lindsay thought so, but this paragraph didn't say much. He thought he would be able to see dynamic images about Kikai's life story. After all, the game was full of text and two-dimensional images, so Lindsay was quite looking forward to it. However, it is too risky to let Professor X, who has telepathic abilities, invade the brain like this. What if he saw something he shouldn't have seen, such as memories about the piercing bureau? Not to mention a salary deduction, Lindsay might even be read. After all, there are walls between the worlds, and it is not a good thing to let people in this world know too much. It seems that being too integrated with the characters is also a sweet trouble. Kikai is too naive, has no sense of crisis, and is easily fooled. Lindsay covered his face. He was a little lazy. He had been busy watching cartoons and playing these days and didn't pay attention to the progress of the task. He opened the task list. Huh? Why did my task box turn red? Is there something wrong with Tony? Professor X's sudden intervention and the abnormality in the task list made Lindsay feel extremely uneasy. No, I'll go check it out. Lindsay couldn't stay in the room anymore, he had to go and confirm his mission target. Thinking of this, he opened the door and ran towards Tony's room with his short legs. He was vaguely worried. Could it be that something really happened to Tony? Kikai and Tony's rooms are on 2 hours, and Lindsay has to take an elevator to get there. He was so anxious that he rushed out the moment the elevator door opened. Unexpectedly, before he had taken a few steps, Kikai's entire body was lifted up by someone. /. He cried out, his eyes widened, and his legs kicked around in all directions. Look what I found, a lost little lamb? Oh, I see, I remember you, you are Kikai, right? Obadiah looked gloomily at the little pet that Stark brought back. It seems that Tony Stark will never realize that Stark Industries is not a playground for children to play house. Kikai remembers you, you are a good grandpa. Lindsay gave up struggling when he saw who stopped him. Wasn't this person Tony's elder and good friend? Obadiah was originally thinking about how to deal with the little thing Kikai, but after hearing what Kikai said, he put the child down instead. Do you know me? Obadiah looked at Kikai with interest. The little girl nodded. Obadiah thought that this child seemed to have some special abilities, so he pretended to be kind and asked Kikai. Smart boy, what are you doing here so late at night? Kikai pointed to the room inside. Kikai came to play with Tony. Obadiah blinked and raised his eyebrows helplessly. He took Kikai's hand and walked towards the elevator while talking. What a coincidence. I just came out from Tony's place. He was a little tired today and has already rested. The elevator door closed and Obadiah held the girl's hand tightly, which was in stark contrast to his gentle tone. A good child won't disturb others' rest, right? Kikai is a good child, right? Kikai thought about it and nodded. Good boy, go to bed then, good night good night, good grandpa Kikai waved at him, opened the door and walked in. Obadiah watched the girl disappear from his sight and immediately stopped smiling. He pressed the elevator door closing button and watched the number of people descending get lower and lower. A sneer gradually appeared at the corner of his mouth. What he didn't expect was that the next second after the elevator left, the good boy who was supposed to be sleeping in bed was running downstairs like crazy. I believe you, you are such a bad old man. Lindsay cursed in his heart as he ran. He didn't even think about Obadiah. What could happen to an old man like him? Visiting Tony's boudoir in the middle of the night must have bad intentions. Fortunately, Professor Charles accidentally reminded Lindsay of the mission, otherwise Kikai might have Been fooled. Lindsay came to Tony's room. The door was ajar and half open. He ran in and found Tony lying on the sofa in GEU's posture, and he seemed to be really resting. But Lindsay always felt something was wrong. Mr. Tony. Lindsay did not leave, for fear of disturbing Tony's rest, so he approached him quietly, but his expression suddenly changed before he got halfway. Tony was not resting at all. Instead, he couldn't control his body and collapsed on the sofa. The place on his chest where the reactor was originally placed was empty, and the clothes there still had signs of being torn. No one knew what Obadiah had done to him, but the man's face was as pale as a death, with blue-black blood vessels oozing on the surface of his skin. His eyes were wide open with fear in them. Tony wanted to say something to Kikai, but Obadiah used a weapon that induced temporary paralysis on him, causing him to use up all his strength but unable to make a sound. Looking at this scene, Lindsay's heart sank. Tony, Tony. Seeing that the other party was unable to respond, Kikai drew his sword. The ice-blue snow created crystal frost hours inside the house. Jade sign, the immortal method opens the box. The ice element explodes, and Kikai releases the immortal power sealed in her body, providing continuous blood recovery for her teammates. Tony's originally pale skin turned rosy for a moment, and the protruding black and red blood vessels on his face quickly disappeared. 7-7. Tony was now able to call out the girl's name. Mr. Tony, are you okay? Lindsay asked hurriedly. Although Tony received treatment from Kikai, he would soon face shock again after losing the energy reactor in his chest. Good boy, do me a favor. Tony could feel that his body temperature had begun to drop. While he was still conscious, he needed to quickly tell Kikai to get the old reactor. Fortunately, when the old reactor was given to Potts, she did not really listen to Tony and throw it away, but made it into a commemorative gift and returned it to him. Go to the studio, on Sheriff Leo's desk, take out the shiny thing in the transparent glass box, he. Bring it to me. He tried to stand up, but fell off the sofa weakly. Tony struggled to squeeze out a voice from his throat, it's on the table. Ha, you can see it at a glance. Sheriff Leo, Kikai knows. Lindsay didn't care about Tony lying on the ground, he rushed to the studio. At this time, he was racing against time. When he arrived at the studio, he went straight to a corner where a duck doll was placed. Sheriff Leo is the character in the cartoon that Kikai watched recently. He is a white feathered duck, wearing a police uniform. Sure enough, the old reactor was right next to it. He hurriedly carried the reactor back upstairs, but Tony on the ground was already dead. Lindsay didn't hesitate any longer, he threw the box hard to the ground. Crash. Picking up the reactor from the glass fragments on the ground, Lindsay laid Tony at and pressed the reactor straight down on the big hole in his chest. What? Tony opened his eyes in pain, and he stiffened his neck to look at his chest. Kikai is rebelling. Lindsay, I'm sorry. Also, don't laugh at this time. 5 minutes before Tony was attacked. Carlson, I'm sorry I can't complete your request. Professor Charles, who had just woken up on the phone, said to Carlson, I can only tell you that Kikai is not a mutant. Her situation is much more complicated. Carlson frowned upon hearing this. He instinctively asked Professor Charles on the other side. Did you see something in her memory? After all, he was almost the RST person to know about Professor Charles's fainting. It was hard not to guess the reason when he had such a big change. Her memory is confused, I just saw her past. Professor Charles answered Carlson. The past, Carlson was puzzled. But Professor Charles did not explain this. He continued to add his intentions. For some reason, I cannot tell you the specific content of the memory. I just have a suggestion. You say. Don't go into it any further, said Professor Charles. This sentence made Carlson stunned. He asked in confusion. But, don't pursue it anymore Professor Charles interrupted him, once the unknown in her memory is known, it will attract the attention of a powerful existence Carlson fell silent after hearing this. So this is why you were injured? Carlson suddenly reacted and asked Professor Charles. Professor Charles sighed and said, maybe backslash. This answer did not give a denied answer. Although Carlson felt a little disappointed, he still chose to believe it. That's all I have to say, Carlson. Sometimes knowing too much is not a good thing. I understand. I will remember your reminder Carlson answered Professor Charles. Professor Charles did not continue talking to him and hung up the phone. Carlson sat on the sofa on the RSTOR of the Stark Industries building and thought, it seems that I need to re-examine this world. Due to Professor Charles's failure, S.H.I.E.L.D. had to take a more direct approach, so he made an appointment with Miss Potts today. Unexpectedly, Professor Charles gave him a warning before meeting her. It is unusual in itself that Professor X, who is at the top of the mutant world, was injured simply through his memory. Even if the professor did not reveal the content of the memory he saw, it was enough for Carlson to obtain a lot of information. Da-da-da. There was the sound of high heels hitting the ground. Carlson looked up and saw Miss Potts, whom he had been waiting for a long time, walking quickly downstairs. Miss Potts? We have an appointment. Carlson noticed that Miss Potts seemed to have lost her usual professional face today, which could be seen from her hurried steps and the hands that were tightly gripping the bag strap. Potts almost missed Carlson when he made the sound. This seemingly deliberate act of ignoring him was indeed a bit rude, but Potts swore that he had no such intention. God knows what she just saw on the computer. It turns out that Obadiah was the mastermind behind Tony's kidnapping, and he was the one who hired the terrorists to kill Tony. Potts' heart was shaken. She didn't even know how to describe her shock. Under such circumstances, her mind was so confused that she completely forgot about meeting Carlson. Fortunately, Carlson took the initiative to remind her at this time, otherwise an embarrassing situation might have occurred. Have you forgotten our date? Potts' stunned expression was too obvious, so Carlson had to speak up again to remind her. Potts came back to his senses after hearing Carlson's reminder. No, right now, follow me. Potts kept walking, let's talk now, right now. Now. Unexpectedly, Miss Potts' attitude towards him changed 180 degrees, and her tone seemed a little impatient. Carlson got up from the sofa and followed her. Yes, follow me. Okay. As Potts quickened his pace, Carlson also followed suit. The woman's impatience left Carlson no time to ask questions, but he also realized the seriousness of the matter. When Potts looked back again, Carlson saw Obadiah. Carlson, who had investigated the people around Tony Stark, naturally knew the other party's identity. But he was surprised by Obadiah's eyes that wanted to tear Potts to pieces. Seeing Obadiah's expression, Potts knew that his act of stealing information and learning of his conspiracy was no longer a secret. She made a prompt decision. After realizing she was exposed, Potts calmed down instead. She walked quickly, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Carlson beside her was able to help her. Go to your UP-CE. I want to have a serious talk with you. I promise you will never forget it. Tony. Colonel Roddy, who received a call from Potts, was on his way home. When he learned that Tony was in danger and had lost contact, he ran through several red lights and drove all the way. Finally I arrived at Stark Tower and found him in the studio. Thank God he was okay, just a little pale. Tony, my God, you look like a dead person. Roddy said worriedly. Tony waved his hands, and the machines around him continued to install the armor on him. Where's Piper? Roddy was sweating and panting as he answered, she's NE. There are VE agents with her. They are going to arrest Obadiah. 5. Tony murmured that ever since Obadiah snatched his reactor, he realized that it was very likely that the other party was also making armor, because the nuclear reactor he made was unique. Obadiah had been asking him for the technology to shrink the nuclear reactor, but he had never agreed. It must be that Piper had discovered something, so the other party was desperate and came directly to him to snatch it. The armor was fully installed and Tony put on the mask. This is really the coolest thing I have ever seen. Roddy said enviously. Not bad. Tony opened the skylight and wanted to rush to Potts, but before that, there was one more thing. What do you need me to do? Roddy ran for most of the block and Nally had time to catch his breath. He sat on the hood of Tony's luxury car and asked the man who was about to take off. Of course. Tony's voice sounded a little distorted through the armor. Don't let anyone mess up the situation. Roddy was listening when he saw Tony pull out a small gur from behind the armor and throw it at him. Roddy was so scared that he quickly jumped out of the car, tilted his head back, widened his eyes, and stretched out his arms, and only then did he manage to catch the little man. Take care of her. After giving his instructions, Tony stood up and flew into the sky without any worries. I go. Oh my God. The two people who stayed behind complained at the same time. Watching Tony disappear into the night sky, the adult and the child, whose faces were covered with exhaust fumes, looked at each other in bewilderment, and saw disgust in each other's eyes. Oh my God, I can't take care of children. What happened? My teammates ran away. Roddy put the little girl on the ground. He still remembered how special this little girl was. For a moment, his pupils contracted. There was a gust of wind by my ears, and a cold chill spread from the sword on my neck. Roddy looked at the sword shining with metallic luster and the expressionless little girl in front of him. Beads of sweat owed down his forehead. This sudden change caught him off guard. 7-7. Take Kikai to. Andy Tony. Lindsay, brother, I don't know the way. Roddy, damn it, Stark, I owe you in my last life. In fact, just as Lindsay worried, Obadiah's mecha was several times larger than Tony's, and the energy nuclear reactor used was also freshly taken from Tony. The Mark Armor's chest requires a lot of power, and the old reactor is only a temporary support. The electric energy is constantly decreasing, so Tony must act quickly. The few agents led by Potts were simply unable to stop Obadiah in his armor. The man blamed all his failures on Potts. He attacked the agents without restraint along the way. He not only treated the agents as targets, but even as toys. After getting rid of the agents who were in the way, he emerged from the basement and questioned. Behind Potts? Where are you planning to escape to? It was all because of this damn woman that he lost everything. He even wanted to save her life and continue working for the company, but she dared to betray him. He will pay back this pain double. Potts was already terrified. Her only thought now was to leave this dangerous place, but she couldn't. Andy anyway but to dodge. She couldn't even use any strength now, not even a trace of strength. What? Obadiah pressed forward step by step, and Potts could only retreat desperately, but she had been forced into a corner. I no longer require your services. He aimed the gun in his hand at the target, and the barrel spun red and hot. Stanny. Tony came ying like a meteor and gave Obadiah a loving bear hug on the head. Boom. The impact from the sky caused the two men to break through the ground and the wall, and they rolled onto the busy street next door. Two huge steel guys were rushing around and rolling across the path of the cars. The materials of their mechas were not something that ordinary cars could withstand. Several vehicles crashed into the mechas and immediately turned into scrap metal. Ah! Help! The vehicles on the road were traveling at extremely high speeds, and the consequence of a collision with a mecha would be a serious traffic accident. For a moment, honking, shouting, screaming, and wailing led the surroundings. Two iron men were beating each other on the road. For a moment, all the vehicles and people here avoided them, and their eyes were full of fear. What is this? Obadiah rose from the ground, his mech as tall as a mountain. I love this suit. He had already risked his life, regardless of the people in the car. In order to attack Tony, Obadiah grabbed a car parked in front of him and lifted it high above his head. /Ah. The car owner's screams echoed on the road. /Ah. Obadiah ignored the cries of innocent people as he lifted up the sedan and threw it in Tony's direction. Along with everything inside, including the driver sitting inside, along with their screams and cries. Tony had no choice but to use all his strength to catch the speeding vehicle. The impact caused sparks to fly from under his feet. His mecha screeched loudly. Only 16% of the energy is left. Such excessive consumption caused the energy of the mecha to out away like water, and even the display screen inside the mecha was very distorted. The energy of his mecha was no longer enough to bear the weight of the vehicle, but if he put the car down, the people inside would definitely get hurt, so he could only hold on. Squeak. There was a sudden break. Beep. Beep, beep, beep. Roddy honked the horn in annoyance, but the vehicle in front didn't move at all. Fortunately, he reacted quickly, otherwise he would have rear-ended it. FXXK, you, the one in front. Can you drive? He was about to collapse. This little girl named Kikai was determined to get involved in Tony's affairs. She even chopped up Tony's VE luxury cars to threaten him to bring her to the scene. She kept urging him along the way, and Roddy was almost going to have a headache. The road conditions, which were usually smooth, also had problems. It was as if someone was trying to make him angry to death. Roddy became furious. The little girl who got on the bus was strangely quiet. She sat in the back seat without saying a word. Roddy planned to park the car far away where Tony could be seen clearly so that Kikai would not run around. But he was wrong. Before he could implement his plan, he noticed that the drivers of the vehicles ahead seemed to have seen something terrifying. They screamed and abandoned their cars and feeling something was wrong, Roddy stopped fastening his seat belt. He held the backrest with one hand, steered with the other, stepped on the accelerator, and backed up rapidly. Unexpectedly, something unexpected happened. Boom. There was a loud bang. His car swayed in place. Roddy hurriedly stepped on the brakes and turned the car to the side at the fastest speed. Then he saw a black gun muzzle in front of him. This was a mechanical armor that was much larger than Tony's Mark armor, and the muzzle in its hand. Fuck, /. Roddy couldn't help but swear. At this time, Obadiah also saw the person sitting in the car clearly, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. His eyes were XED on the little girl sitting in the back seat with an evil smile. Hey, Tony. I've got a present for you. Tony had just put the car he had taken on the ground when he heard Obadiah's voice behind him. Be careful. Roddy quickly opened his mouth to remind him, but by then he and his car were already ying in the air. Boom. The front of the car slammed heavily into the defenseless red mecha. Tony was knocked ying. The damage to the vehicle was also serious. The entire front of the car was distorted out of shape, and the airbag burst out at the moment of impact, which gave Roddy a certain amount of cushioning for his head. However, his body hit the glass on the roof of the car, the glass shattered, and his body was directly stuck on the glass shards, causing him to grimace in pain. But the RST thing Roddy did was not to check his own injuries, but to call the name of the girl in the backseat. 77. Kikai, are you okay? Roddy, who was dizzy, did not hear the girl's response. He wanted to turn around to check on Kikai's safety, but as soon as he moved a little, he felt a sharp pain. The deformed front of the car squeezes the driving position into a closed and narrow space. His chest was covered in blood from the friction of the broken glass, some of which even seeped into his esh. What's worse is that there is a strong smell of gasoline in the car, which means that if they don't leave, there is a risk of explosion. Damn it, Roddy pulled at the safety belt desperately, but the equipment that was originally intended to save lives now became an obstacle to his survival. At this moment he felt a chill on his face. A tiny crystal of ice melted on the tip of his nose. Beautiful frost hours quickly spread on the glass fragments that were broken into a spider web, and his body suddenly felt lighter, and the pain quickly subsided. Call. The breath that Roddy exhaled turned into white mist in the car. Need help? While he was stunned, someone knocked on his half-broken car window, and Roddy looked up. The little girl's fair and tender face appeared outside. When she saw him looking at her, she gave Roddy a sweet smile. For a moment Roddy thought he was seeing things. Kikai. When did she run away? It might be a little painful. Then Roddy saw Kikai raise the cold sword again, the sword that could split the car in half with a slight swing. Kikai pointed at the car, and Roddy felt the terrifying sword blade moving back and forth on his body. This kid doesn't know how to control his strength. What if he gets hit by the opponent? Etc., etc. Luo De was sweating profusely and quickly shouted to Chi Chi, I think I can still save him. It's too late. Don't worry, Kikai. I'll be careful. The little girl gave Rhodey a reassuring look, then raised her sword high. Listen to 7, count to 3. Wait. What are you going to do? 3. It's too late to say, then soon. The blue sword light slashed down. Boom. The explosion sounded in Roddy's ears. Just before the explosion, Kikai pulled Roddy out of the car. For it. Roddy was still in shock, his face pale, and he was gasping for breath as he looked at the tiny body of Kikai in front of him. You kid, wow, you are really strong. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. The moment the explosion happened just now, he thought he was going to be killed. Boom. 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 The collision of steel against steel made Roddy hear a horrible echo, and a huge explosion sounded in his ears. He and Kikai looked towards the source of the sound and found that the situation on Tony's side could only be described as terrible. Tony got up from the ground dizzy, and was met with Obadiah's Earth attack. He was knocked to the ground without even a chance to dodge, and Obadiah launched another Earth attack. Tony could only use his arms to block the opponent's attack, and the damage from the repeated collisions with the mecha kept sending out sharp warnings. I have been holding you in my arms for 30 years. Obadiah raised his foot and crushed the red armor under his feet. I built this company from scratch. Boom. A punch hit Tony's armor on the chest. Don't try to get in my way. He grabbed Tony and threw him backwards, straight through a bus. The iron plate behind him unfolded and a rocket launcher extended out. Obadiah aimed at the big hole that Tony had smashed. Direct launch. Boom. 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 A violent explosion sounded. Thick smoke and flames rose into the sky, obscuring the view. Tony's eyes were full of and the impact of the explosion made his head dizzy. A stream of light shot out from the sea of red. Gradually, many tiny water droplets appeared on the inside of the helmet, covering his face. Tony opened his mask and saw the gorgeous frost hours. After regaining consciousness, he stretched out his hand to catch one, and the pattern of the snowflake touched the palm of the mecha and turned into white mist in an instant. The little girl held the sword in one hand, with condensed ice crystals under her feet. The aims around her seemed to have life and were hiding from her in fear, just like a mouse seeing a cat. Scared and timid. She walked towards Tony, the sword in her hand emitting a dark light. Tony recognized the little girl and showed surprise on his face. Kikai. Kikai tilted her head back and smoothed out the messy talisman paper on her head, revealing her eyes that were as bright as stars in the sky. She saw the man's face, the one she had engraved in her heart. Mr. Tony, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. The girl said softly. Kikai, protect you. Tony was stunned for a moment, a smile on his face. Ha 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 ha. Obadiah laughed wildly and arrogantly, and in the real light, he seemed to have seen Tony turned into a corpse. He walked forward step by step, crossing the aims and smoke. He wanted to witness his own success with his own eyes. As Obadiah pushed away the smoke, he suddenly felt a little confused. As he got closer, some water vapor appeared on the surface of the mecha's display panel. What? Then a huge tremor came from the center of the explosion in front, followed by a strong gust of wind. The water vapor mixed in the aims made the temperature of the air wave extremely high, scorching and terrifying. How is that possible? He felt a burning pain on his skin inside the mecha. Under such horrible temperature, Obadiah actually had the illusion that he was being steamed. The scene before him made his eyes widen. Boom, boom, boom. Obadiah looked at Tony in disbelief as he walked out from the and smoke, his eyes wide open. No one can remain unscathed from such an attack. Even Stark couldn't do it. But this person did it? Obadiah stared at the little girl sitting on the shoulder of the red mecha. There was a small ball emitting ice blue light next to her, which kept spinning around. Every time the ball rotated, it left behind frost and ice, which fell like snowflakes. As expected. He should have cut the roots in the RST place. Obadiah roared, his eyes LED with aims of rage, like a spewing angry dragon. You damn bastard! He jumped up and pounced towards the big and small. Kikai jumped off Tony's shoulder and dodged the opponent's attack. Tony also gathered energy again and emitted rays from his chest. Obadiah took the ray's impact head on. The little girl moved so fast that he couldn't lock onto the tiny Gur, so the larger target Tony became his outlet. He raised his foot and kicked Tony away. The red mecha ew out like a cannonball and crashed into another building. When Kikai saw this scene, her lips tightened into a line. She went straight forward with sword in hand. Go, backslash. She swung her sword and chopped it down at Obadiah's head. Several yellow sword auras shot up into the sky and rushed straight forward. Wherever the sword energy went, the air was cut apart. Kikai's Yunlei ancient swordsmanship caused continuous damage to Obadiah's mecha. Listen to the Imperial Edict and announce this Imperial Edict. The cold sick ghost surrounding her attacked the opponent, and each attack condensed into ice on Obadiah's mecha. Obadiah's mecha creaked, his legs were frozen, and his body was shaking constantly. The internal display interface began to freeze from the edges, and the screen began to occur due to poor contact. No. Obadiah's face turned ugly as he realized that Kikai had the ability to restrain the armor. Real name, Lord Dewey. Kikai releases the immortal power sealed in her body and marks Obadiah with the Dewey talisman, causing continuous damage from the ice element. Of course Obadiah would GHT back against the girl's attack, but his armor was too large, making it very inconvenient for him to move. Kikai moved quickly, and often as soon as he swung his ST, the little girl would run away to another place. Hateful! Obadiah growled. Kikai's sword slashed on his mecha again and again, leaving deep scars on it, which made Obadiah's heart bleed. This armor is his pride. His mecha was one of the sturdiest equipment, but it became scrap metal under Kikai's sword. No. There was a sizzling sound inside Obadiah's armor, and frost had spread to his entire body. His movements became slower and slower, and even swinging his arms became more and more difficult. Jade sign, the immortal method opens the box. Kikai put her engers together in front of her chest, and a mysterious rune appeared in front of her. She closed her eyes, and her whole body was lifted up by frost and snow. The Ying snow aches surrounded her and wrapped her up. The runes gradually disappeared. An invisible pressure emanated from her, like an inexplicable call, a magical power that condensed into a dazzling white light from her body. White light enveloped Kikai's entire body, making her gur look holy and pure. Do not. The cold frost completely covered Obadiah, and the thick layer of ice made the mecha unable to move. Snapped. A sound. The ashing red light and warning electronic sound inside the mecha also disappeared, and his world fell into darkness. Obadiah, trapped in the mecha, was furious. He pounded inside and yelled like crazy, but to no avail. Tony came to Kikai, picked up the girl and played silly dad's favorite lifting game. Kikai, you are amazing, how did you do it? You are awesome. Kikai had never felt this kind of warmth before, and joy exploded in her heart. Now that the danger has been resolved, Lindsay allowed his consciousness to merge with Kikai again. The little girl happily played childish parent-child games with Tony until Roddy, who was panting, came to them. Roddy was in a dish evil, with blood stains all over his face, clothes, and pants, but this only looked serious. In fact, his injuries had already recovered due to Kikai's strong milk intake, but he still pretended to be injured on purpose. God, Tony, do you know how I spent the last few minutes? Roddy complained. Please, don't let me take care of the kids anymore. What's wrong? Isn't our Kikai being well behaved? Tony took off his helmet and smiled widely, his big caramel eyes met Kikai's innocent eyes. Our Kikai is the cutest child in the world. Tony's praise made Kikai very happy, and her big eyes curved into crescent shapes. Ahaha, Roddy begs to differ. Really? I hope you'll think the same when you see the tragic scene in the parking lot. Colonel Roddy complained, Kikai, tell me how you threatened me because of Tony. The little girl blinked, her eyes a little wandering and confused. She looked at Tony who was waiting for her answer, then looked at Colonel Roddy, whose expression became increasingly stiff, and fell into deep thought. Looking at the little girl's genuine expression, Rhodey had a bad feeling. No way. No way. You don't forget it, do you? Kikai doesn't remember it? The two of them spoke at the same time. What a heart-wrenching statement this is. Roddy covered his chest and screamed in pain. A row of black lines appeared on his forehead, and he was hesitant to do it. Ah! Ah! The feeling of his ST hitting cotton made Roddy wail, I knew it! I knew it! Kikai, do you really not remember, or are you pretending not to remember? Roddy gritted his teeth. Kikai still shook her head, as if she really didn't remember. Kikai, did you do anything wrong? Kikai asked Luadai cautiously. She lowered her eyes and said in a soft voice. I'm sorry, please don't, I hate Kikai. My God. Seeing Kikai like this, Rhodey suddenly felt a little guilty. He quickly stood up and comforted Kikai. Oh no, Kikai did nothing wrong, Kikai did a great job. It's all me. It's all my fault. Roddy was defeated immediately. He felt a sharp pain in his heart. It turned out that this silly little girl really forgot everything. So he decided to take it all on his own. It's nothing, it's just a few cars destroyed, I'm sure Tony won't mind. There was a slight tremor in Roddy's tone. Car? What car? Tony wondered. The car in your garage, of course. How many cars were destroyed? One. Oh, it's okay, just buy another one. There are no more left. Tony, what? Rhodey is his friend of many years. Besides, Tony also saw clearly that this matter must have something to do with Kikai. Otherwise, with the destructive power of Rhodey, an ordinary human being, it would be impossible for him to behead all the cars. But he quite liked to see Roddy being humiliated, especially that helpless expression. It was a lively evening today. Agents from SHIELD and CIA arrived late and took Obadiah away. Tony and the others were also preparing to go home. How much energy is left? 11%. Can you hold on until you get back to the building? There is enough computing energy. Tony picked up Kikai and said, Kikai, do you want to Y higher? Think /. Kikai nodded and said. Kikai, I want to see the stars /. Tony smiled, let's go then. Tony and Kikai soared in the air, passing through a bright stream of light. Under the night sky, Kikai seemed very safe in his arms, her head resting on the armor's shoulder. Looking up at the shining stars. The stars here are as beautiful as those in Bubulilo, she thought. Her body was pressed against the nuclear reactor of the armor, and the running energy made it warm. Kikai didn't hate it and even liked it very much. Kikai, we don't have much time left to Y, we'll be back soon Tony whispered to the girl in his arms. We're going home Well, Kikai and Mr. Tony, go home Back at Stark Tower, Tony took off his Mark armor step by step. Piper, I'm Annie. Yes, Kikai, I asked her to go back to her room and rest. She's Annie. You've worked hard today. Thank you. After comforting Potts and hanging up the phone, Tony poured himself a glass of wine and walked to the sofa. Click. He lifted his foot, and the broken glass on the ground made its presence felt. Thinking of Kikai's clumsy, yet cute expression when she installed the reactor for him, Tony couldn't help but smile. Now he was very excited, and since he couldn't sleep anyway, he might as well go to the studio. The battle with Obadiah made him realize that there were still many areas for improvement in the Mark armor. While his thoughts were still clear, he had to hurry and record his inspiration. Thinking of this, Tony drank the wine in the glass in one gulp, took the elevator and went downstairs. On the way to the studio, Tony accidentally saw the luxury car that Roddy said he accidentally damaged. After reading it, Tony made a decision to be more friendly to the old man in the future. After all, it is really embarrassing for a general of a military region to be threatened by a little girl with a sword. Hey, speak of CAO and here he comes. Just as I was thinking about him, the phone rang. Tony picked up the phone and looked at it. He raised his eyebrows when he saw Rhodey's name on the screen. Line connected. Dude, it seems like the stimulation I gave you tonight wasn't enough. What can't we talk about tomorrow? Tony teased. Tony. Where are you? Roddy on the phone was very anxious. His side was full of noisy noises, and these noises were the sounds of police sirens. Tony frowned. I'm already back. What? God, get Kikai out of there now. Obadiah ran away. What? Hearing what Roddy said, Tony threw away his phone and ran towards Kikai's room like crazy. Push the door open and enter. The little girl did not rest but was leaning against the window looking at the stars. Mr. Tony. Kikai heard the noise, stood up and turned to look at him. Kikai. Outside the window behind her, a missile dilated Tony's pupils. Boom. There was a huge explosion, Ames LLED the room, the little girl was knocked over in an instant, and Tony fell backwards heavily. The entire building was shaking violently, walls were collapsing, dust was ying, and rubble was rolling down. Tony's head hit the wall and blood oozed out. His eyes were blurry and his ears were buzzing, but he was still calling Kikai's name. 7-7. No, no, don't. He Nally had a family, and he promised the little girl that he would stay with her forever. He hasn't been with her for the rest of her life, he hasn't seen her enjoy all the pleasures of life, he will never allow such a thing to happen. Tony struggled to get up from the ground using his hands and feet, and staggered forward. Kikai, please don't die, don't. This was the only thought in his mind. But when he found Kikai, he was completely stunned. Kikai was lying motionless on the ground, the little hat on her head was gone, and the broken ceiling steel bars were pressing down on half of her body. 7-7. Tony moved the steel bars with great effort and carefully picked up the girl. Kikai, Kikai, wake up. Please, open your eyes and look at me, Tony called out anxiously, his voice a little hoarse, but he still persisted. He gently stroked the girl's cheek with his hands were trembling, he was afraid and worried. As if she heard Tony's call, Kikai's eyelids moved and she slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were a little dazed and her consciousness was a little confused. Kikai looked at the person in front of her. It's you. Tony excitedly hugged Kikai tightly in his arms and let her head rest on his chest. Don't be afraid, dear child. Kikai looked at Tony, she felt something, her eyes were full of nostalgia. Mr. Tony, I'm sorry. No, no, Kikai, don't. Tony didn't want Kikai to say that. He knew that if he let Kikai continue to say this, he would probably lose this lovely girl forever. Mr. Tony's heart was beating very fast, and Kikai could hear it. She knew that he was worried about her. But Kikai, I'm so tired, so cold. It was just like the time I fell off the mountain in my dream. It hurts. Mr. Tony's arms are so warm. Can Kikai sleep in Mr. Tony's arms for a while, just for a while? If Kikai falls asleep, can she wake up again? Can I see Mr. Tony again? No one answered Kikai, but she already knew the answer to the question. I'm sorry Mr. Tony, Kikai repeated it again. Kikai, please stop saying sorry, okay, Tony held Kikai with even greater strength, his tone pleading. His voice trembled, as if he was afraid of losing something. Kikai listened and felt very sad. She was a bad girl. She had clearly promised to stay with Mr. Tony forever. But Kikai wants to break the appointment. Mr. Tony, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. So cold. Tony's hug tightened and his voice became hoarse. It's not cold, it's not cold. I'll hold Kikai and it won't be cold anymore. Be good, Kikai. Kikai opened her lips slightly and exhaled a breath of cold air. She stopped talking and slowly closed her eyes, enjoying the hug and warmth Tony gave her. Tony put his face against Kikai's cheek and felt the cold touch. His heart also felt cold, as if a bucket of cold water was thrown into it. Kikai. Kikai. The only response he got was calmness, so calm that it was frightening. The little girl who always looked at him with her big eyes and always followed him never woke up. Again. Kikai, please don't scare me, okay? Wake up, please. Tony's tears owed down the corners of his eyes and fell on the girl's forehead. The girl seemed to know the emotion contained in this tear and comforted him for the last time. The tiny body turned into ice blue fluorescent dots, circling around Tony reluctantly, and Nally disappeared in his pupils. Unable to believe it, Tony stared blankly at his empty arms. He stretched out his hand and made a grabbing gesture towards the air in front of him. This doesn't change anything. Ha ha ha. Boom. Obadiah descended from the air and looked at the man's painful expression with satisfaction. How is it? Sad, backslash. Damn it, backslash. Tony glared at Obadiah angrily. His STS were clenched so tightly that his joints creaked. He hates it, he really hates it. But what can be done? Kikai has already left. And this time Obadiah would not give him another chance. Boom. Tony was struggling to hide in the ruins. Obadiah's artillery re-destroyed the road leading to the studio. He had no way to put on the Mark armor and even lost the ability to GHT back. He rolled on the ground several times. The fragments of the shells and the exposed steel bars on the ground left deep scars on his skin, but the pain in his body was not as great as the pain in his heart. Tony, your time has come to die. Obadiah laughed, then aimed at Tony and pressed the re-button. The bomb exploded above the running man's head. The strong shockwave caused Tony to smash hard against the wall. His head hit the sharp protrusion, and he fell into a coma, and his whole body fell to the ground. The aims were about to engulf him in ash. At this time, wind blade. The blue wind blew away the aims, revealing Tony's gur. The traveler's gur suddenly appeared, and when Lindsay looked at Obadiah, his heart and eyes were LED with anger. He was going to kill the son of a bitch. How dare you bully my Kikai? And hit BA, and hit Tony. Simply unforgivable. It happened so quickly that Lindsay's body was like a gust of wind and he was beside Obadiah in the blink of an eye. Ho. Damn you bastard, backslash. Lindsay roared with gritted teeth. He jumped up, stepped on Obadiah's armor with his feet, and swung out the wind blade again. Obadiah was startled and quickly dodged. With a loud bang, a deep pit appeared on the oar. This time, the wind blade actually created a groove, and this groove continued to extend. The oar couldn't withstand the force of the wind blade and collapsed instantly. Obadiah, who had luckily dodged the attack, ran outside in a hurry, but the weight of the mecha caused the already fragile ground to be impacted again with every step he took. What? Cracks spread to his feet and the oar shattered. Obadiah grasped the edge in panic, looking at the young man who suddenly appeared in surprise. Who are you? The boy looked at him with hatred in his eyes. Kill your people. Lindsay stretched out his hand and felt the presence of the wind. The wind elements understood the boy's anger, and they rushed into his hands. The storm has formed. Go to hell, scum. Lindsay shouted, and the storm rushed towards Obadiah, wrapping his body and ying out. Boom. The tornado was LED with countless wind blades, which tore and cut Obadiah's body. Ah! There were bursts of screams, and Obadiah's screams were creepy. He wanted to escape, but his whole body was surrounded by wind blades and he couldn't move at all. He could only watch the wind blades tearing through the protection of the mecha and leaving wounds on his esh. Soon he was covered in blood. Finally, the storm stopped, and the gur that was swept high into the sky immediately fell down, and there was a deep abyss below. He must die. No, Obadiah screamed in despair. But no one would save him. While falling, Obadiah saw a boy standing by the window. He stretched out his hand and begged him. But the boy's murderous eyes tore his hope apart. Boom. His body fell to the ground like a rag. Puff. Obadiah opened his mouth and blood gushed out uncontrollably. He was not reconciled. But he could no longer control his body, and it had been shredded by the wind blades. Boom. The sound of something heavy falling. The rubble struck Obadiah, and the impact knocked his entire body over. Ahem. He spat out a large pool of blood mixed with broken internal organs. Lindsay walked to Obadiah's body and looked at him coldly. Obadiah felt that gaze. He raised his head with difficulty and saw a pair of blood-red eyes. Lindsay raised the edgeless sword high, held the hilt with both hands, and pointed the sharp tip of the sword at his target. Backslash go to hell. Backslash. Backslash no. Backslash. The sword blade cut through the ash, and bright red liquid spurted out, and the dark liquid soaked the traveler's clothes. Lindsay blinked, wiped away the still warm moisture on his face, and retracted the sword. He turned his eyes away from the hideous and unwilling face on the ground. I raised my head and looked upwards, and saw a girl whose face could not be seen standing by the broken window of the tall building. The little young girl in the corner covered her eyes and asked him, "Traveler, are you still not well?" Lindsay retracted his gaze, and without hesitation, he strode forward. "Solved, Paimon, let's go." A couple walking in a small park. "Hey, honey, look, is that kid Ying in the sky?" "How is that possible, sweetheart, you must have seen it wrong." "Oh my god, it seems to be true." "Mutants. Let's go take a picture." "No, what if they attack us?" "Why are you so timid?" "I call this cautious." Fart. The young man sitting on the bench lowered his head, his hair on his forehead was messy in the wind. And his expression could not be seen clearly. The couple's conversation reached his ears, and he wiped his face and stood up. One hand made a st, and the other hand made a line-reeling motion. The little girl floating in the sky eased straight towards the boy. The boy stretched out a hand and easily caught the little girl who was floating towards him. "What? It turns out to be a hydrogen balloon." "Haha, I said you saw it wrong." "Luckily I didn't go, otherwise I would have been embarrassed." "You're quite frequent in talking after the fact, huh?" "No, hey, dear, wait for me." The young couple had a quarrel and left Lindsay's side. Paimon, who was hiding in his arms, breathed a sigh of relief. She patted her chest and said with lingering fear, "Oh, I was so scared, luckily I didn't get caught." "Traveler, are you okay?" Paimon stared at the corners of Lindsay's eyes, where there were still traces of moisture. "Oh, it's nothing, just some sand blown in by the wind, I just wiped it off." Oh. Paimon nodded. The two fell silent again. Lindsay looked at the grey portrait of Kikai in the queue and felt a little uncomfortable. The price of being highly integrated with the character was that he could empathize with Kikai's emotions. Even though he had dealt with Obadiah and relieved the hatred in his heart, he could still feel a dull pain in his chest. Lindsay nearly girt out where the psychological counseling rate of the External Affairs Department remained so high. In fact, he could lower the degree of role integration, not as a traveler, not as any character, but just as an ordinary person to do the task. But what's the point of such a journey? Without the game's cheat code, his mission might have failed at the very beginning. Besides, the character can be resurrected after being grayed out, it's not like you'll never see him again. Lindsay calmed down. He opened the task progress bar and there was 1% left. It seems that as long as Tony Stark of Chaley announces that he is Iron Man, his mission will be accomplished. Alas, I wonder if the rating will drop to C this time. After all, the process of the mission was not very good, and he was almost killed by the villain. Fortunately, there was Brother Kong to cover him, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. Iron Man is one of the pillars of this world. If he dies, the world will basically collapse in half. Lindsay was extremely grateful for this. Thinking of Tony, I wonder if he has received treatment. Although Lindsay blocked the aims when the explosion occurred, he seemed to have fallen quite badly before, so it is hard to say whether he has a concussion. Traveler. Traveler. Paimon waved his hand to interrupt Lindsay's wild thoughts. Huh? What happened to Paimon? Lindsay came back to his senses and gave Paimon a puzzled look. Why are not you talking? Paimon put her hands behind her back, tilted her head, and said to Lindsay, Traveler, where shall we go next? Where to go? This is a good question. Lindsay didn't know when Tony would reveal his identity, so before that he had to ND a place for Paimon and himself to rest. Cuckoo. Paimon covered his stomach in distress, his little face wrinkled. Hungry. The lively expression of the little girl relieved a lot of the haze in Lindsay's heart. He patted his clothes, stared at the red bloodstains on them for a moment, and then said to Paimon. Let me wash the clothes, Paimon, let's go and do something to eat. Great, Paimon hasn't eaten any food here except sand, let's get going. Lindsay found a faucet in the park where passers-by washed their faces and rubbed his clothes. The bloodstains had not been there for too long, and soon only some red marks were left. It nearly didn't look so scary anymore. Do he have to wear a whole set of clothes? What if Tony doesn't reveal his identity for a week or a month, then wouldn't he have to wear the same set of clothes until they become smelly? Lindsay thought so. And Paimon also needs a change of clothes. It doesn't matter if I'm a little sloppy, I have to dress Paimon up nicely. He had a plan in mind. But the most urgent thing is to solve the food problem RST. We can't let Paimon go hungry all the time. After cleaning up, he carried Paimon to Andy something to eat. Paimon can walk on his own. The little girl puffed out her cheeks and said contentedly. After Lindsay told Paimon the consequences of being discovered that he could Y, they made 3 rules. Paimon could not Y when there were people around, but he could Y as much as he wanted when they were alone. Although Paimon patted her chest and guaranteed that she could walk, Lindsay denied the idea after seeing her walk once. The drunk guy on the side of the road walks more smoothly than Paimon. This is certainly not Paimon's fault. Whether in the game or now, the girl has gone to the ground so many times that it is almost non-existent. However, he did not undermine Paimon's self-confidence. Of course I know Paimon can walk by himself, so can you wait until I get tired of carrying Paimon and then walk by himself? It's faster this way. Alright, I'll listen to the traveler. It's not like Paimon wants to be lazy. A white lie told by a teenager to take care of his younger sister made the elderly people who were walking and exercising in the park smile knowingly. Steve had noticed these 2 kids a long time ago, and since he was awakened, he had never given up physical training for a single day. Every day before dawn, he would start running around the park. The same was true today. When he saw these 2 children, he thought they must have encountered some difficulties. Because the boy kept crying. So he didn't bother them. Sometimes children have strong self-esteem, and it would be bad for a stranger to interfere without his knowledge. After running a few laps, when he went to check again, the boy seemed to be any. The 2 little guys started talking about eating. Steve Nally felt relieved. Seeing the boy carrying the girl out, he adjusted his breathing and slowly followed them. Ah! It smells so good. There's something delicious for the travelers. Paimon's eyes suddenly lit up. There was indeed a smell of food wafting over, like some fried food, which smelled particularly appetizing. Lindsay swallowed his saliva and felt a little greedy, but he quickly realized the point. Paimon, have you ever thought about a question? He asked Paimon, looking at the pile of coconut milk in his backpack. What's the problem? Can't we ask it later? Traveler, let's go buy something to eat RST. Paimon was getting impatient. She caught a glimpse of the food truck in the distance, where the fragrance was coming from. Is there a possibility that we have no money? Traveler, why are you looking at Paimon like that? Paimon never takes Mora with him when he goes out. Paimon covered himself angrily. I remember that you have a lot of Mora, traveler. Lindsay put Paimon on the ground. He carefully searched his whole body but found nothing. It's Conramed, there is no Mora. And even if there is Mora, it is useless in this world. After all, if the Chuangguan Bureau had Mora's technology to convert foreign currencies, they would have become rich long ago and would not be as stingy as they are now. What should I do? But Paimon is really hungry. Paimon's face fell in frustration, and she looked at the dining car with longing eyes. How about drinking coconut milk to lull your stomach? There is plenty of coconut milk here in Lindsay. As Kikai, he has no appetite. Coconut milk is just a condiment that Kikai likes, more for psychological satisfaction. Physically, it's just average. Sure enough, they each drank a box of coconut milk, but it was of no use at all. No, Paimon is even hungrier. Not to mention Paimon, after drinking the coconut milk, Lindsay not only wanted to eat more, but also recalled the good times in the past. As he drank, his eyes became red again. At this moment, a tall shadow blocked their way. "Kids, I'm so tired from running. I don't have the energy now. Could you please buy me some breakfast?" Lindsay looked up and saw a handsome man with blonde hair and blue eyes smiling and handing him a banknote. "Hello. My name is Steve Rogers. Can you run a trip for me?" Steve Rogers, Captain America, was born in 1918. He was originally a thin young man. After being transformed by the US government, he became a super soldier. After sleeping in the ice for 70 years, he was recently awakened by SHIELD and is currently in the recovery stage. However, Lindsay is not very clear about these things now. Steve is wearing casual sportswear, without the iconic battle uniform and shield. It is basically impossible for him to recognize his identity. Paymon on the side is even more impossible. As a reward, the remaining money can be used as your errand fee. Steve said gently, and handed the money to the boy with an encouraging look. Lindsay was stunned when he saw the amount of money. Even though they had no concept of money, they still remembered the Arabic numerals. The face value of the banknote was not enough to buy breakfast. It was obvious that the man named Steve deliberately gave them the money. However, he couldn't refuse someone's kindness, and the feeling of hunger was indeed unpleasant. "Traveler, he looks like a good man, and Mr. Steve does look very tired, so let's help him." Paymon said so. Tired? With this strong body, hard muscles, and full spirit, except for the wet hair that proved he had just nished exercise, how could Steve show that he was so tired that he couldn't even walk a few steps? It's clearly an excuse. However, Paymon's words gave Lindsay's useless self-esteem a way out. What's the point of riding a bicycle when he can't even afford to eat? "Okay, Mr. Steve, please wait a moment, we'll be right back." Lindsay took the banknotes and walked towards the dining car holding Paymon. Steve saw the two men leave and smiled slightly. These two children are very smart and understand things quickly. Lindsay and Paymon came to the food truck, which was a very common food truck in New York that specialized in selling hamburgers. Beef is the most basic main dish, and there are also chicken, cod, and other types, lots of cheese, self-selected side dishes and sauces, which look very appetizing. Wow, every one of the travelers looks delicious. Paymon wants to eat some too. Paymon looked at the hamburgers on the table and swallowed her saliva, her eyes sparkling with stars. She saw the various hamburgers placed next to the food cart, and she was like a puppy seeing meat. Bones. She wanted to pounce on the table and take 2 big bites. "Oops, I forgot to ask Mr. Steve about his taste." Unexpectedly, Paymon did not forget his main task. They were helping Mr. Steve buy breakfast. He did not expect that there were so many kinds of hamburgers sold in the food truck that he did not know which one to buy for a moment. There was no other way. After all, they were entrusted by someone else and could not make do with it. So Lindsay and Paymon went back to ask Steve about his taste before coming back. "I bought a chicken breast burger for Mr. Steve, while Lindsay and Paymon chose beef and cod burgers, respectively, and went back with their food." Handing the burger to Steve, Lindsay didn't ask for the remaining money. "Here's the change. We used it to buy burgers." "Thank you, sir." Steve didn't refuse. He took the change and smiled. "You're welcome. There's a stone table over there. Let's eat there." He pointed to a clean stone table not far away. // Lindsay agreed, and then he and Paymon followed Steve. The three of them sat at the stone table and had a leisurely breakfast. Steve had a good impression of this gentle and polite boy. He observed the boy and the little girl, named Paymon, inconspicuously. No one could resist the American sweetheart who took the initiative to get close to him. He was too serious in both appearance and behavior. At first glance, he was the type who would be given the nice guy card, which made people feel very reassured. Within one meal, Steve knew the situation of the two children. A brother and sister whose parents had both passed away came to New York to visit distant relatives. But they didn't expect that the relatives had moved away long ago and had spent all their money, so the two little ones ended up living on the streets. "Paymon, what?" "Lindsay, Paymon, follow my gaze." Lindsay, who had no official identity, had to make up a lie against his conscience. Unexpectedly, the very kind-hearted Mr. Steve believed them without any hesitation. "So do you have a place to stay tonight?" Lindsay and Paimon looked at each other and shook their heads at Steve. Lindsay has a lot of opinions about the accommodation issue. The Bureau has even restored the original characters, so why can't they come up with a Chenji pot so that they don't have to sleep on the streets? My house is not far from here. Do you want to come to my house today? I have 2 bedrooms. I can let you stay there temporarily until you end a place to stay. Steve really didn't want to see 2 minors spending the night outside. He seriously suspected that the 2 kids had done it on the park bench yesterday. Although the security in New York is relatively good, the appearance of the boy and the little girl is indeed very conspicuous. They have been living without a XED place to stay, and they might be targeted by bad guys one day. Really? Great, travelers, please agree, When Payman heard this, his face immediately became overjoyed. It's so cold in the park and the benches are so hard. Let's go to Mr. Steve's house and sleep on the bed. This proposal really made Lindsay excited, and he agreed after hesitating for a while. Thank you very much, Mr. Steve. We won't live here for free. We can exchange it for labor. My cooking skills are pretty good. If you don't mind, leave the cooking to me from now on. Paimon nodded and sold it to Steve. Travelers cook delicious food, even better than this burger. Of course I won't mind. Steve naturally wouldn't refuse the children's kindness. After the 3 of them reached an agreement, Steve felt relieved. He didn't want to let the 2 lovely children be in danger. His house was not far from here, and soon, Lindsay and Payman followed him to an ordinary old-style residential building. Steve turned on the light and invited the 2 men in. The house is a bit messy, he explained with a smile. It is normal for a single man living alone to have a messy home, but Lindsay knows that Steve said this just out of modesty. Although the furnishings in Steve's home are simple, the hygiene is decidedly not bad, and every aspect shows that he is a meticulous person. Wow, Mr. Steve has so many books at home. Paimon expressed curiosity about the books scattered throughout the room. She tilted her head and recognized the name of the book closest to her. Modern American History. Mr. Steve has collected a lot of old books, which is amazing. Paimon couldn't help but admire. Ah, these. Steve just smiled faintly at the girl's words. I just want to know more about, history. These books were actually given by SHIELD, and the purpose was to help him adapt to modern life faster and better, and to understand what happened in this country after World War II. He lost too much time. Paimon was a little restless in the new environment. Seeing that Mr. Steve was a cheerful and gentle person, she didn't want to stay with the traveler anymore. Lindsay's arm happened to be numb, so he simply put her down. Paimon walked unsteadily, but at least it was an improvement compared to before. She followed Mr. Steve and toured the room curiously. Oops. Bang. Paymon's foot was tripped by a hard object placed on the wall. Fortunately, Steve next to her reacted quickly and hugged her in time, thus avoiding the tragedy of falling. It hurts. What is this, Mr. Steve? Paimon asked, pointing at the object that tripped her foot. It was a shield with a red and white background and VE stars printed in the middle. Steve's eyes ashed with panic. He naturally put away his shield. Ah, this is the fitness equipment I use for exercise. So that's how it is. It seems that Mr. Steve really loves sports. Paimon didn't pay much attention to it, and his attention was quickly distracted to other places. But Lindsay recognized this thing. This style, this pattern. Steve is Captain America. This is your room. Steve opened the guest room door and said to Lindsay and Paimon. The guest room is simply furnished with a large double bed, a table, and several chairs. Okay, you guys take a rest. If you need anything, just call me . Considering that the children spent last night on park benches and probably didn't get enough rest, Steve gave them some time to have a good rest. Thank you, Mr. Steve. You're welcome. Steve said and left. It seems pretty good Lindsay looked around the room and said with a smile. Is that so, Paimon was the RST to jump onto the bed. Well, although the bed is hard, the quilt is very soft and comfortable. The little guy lay on it with his eyes closed, enjoying the soft feeling. Traveler, Paimon wants to sleep Paimon rubbed his eyes and said to Lindsay, go to sleep. Lindsay covered Paimon with a blanket and took off his shoes. He also wanted to take a nap. Just as he was about to sit down on the bed, Lindsay stopped when he saw the bloodstains on his clothes. The clothes are too dirty. Although it looks like blurry red fuel, if you smell it up close, the disgusting rust smell is still very obvious. Lindsay couldn't lie on someone else's clean bed in his dirty clothes, but if he took them off and slept naked with Paimon, that would be too sinful. Maybe he will be arrested by Captain America as a pedophile. Forget it, let's go take a shower. Lindsay put his shoes on again. Steve hid the shield that almost exposed him in his bedroom. After making sure it would not be discovered, he went to the kitchen. When he lived alone, he only opened a few times. Shield gave him a subsidy every month, so he basically ate out every day. Looking at the only cereal, beer, and macaroni in the refrigerator, Steve took one out, looked at the packaging date, and put it back silently. Forget beer. The only food that can be eaten is expired, and children might get sick if they eat these things. It seems I have to buy some fresh ingredients, he thought. Mr. Steve. Hearing the boy calling him, Steve closed the refrigerator and turned around. Why aren't you resting? Is there something you need my help with, Sarah? Steve asked. Lindsay felt a little embarrassed and awkward, and he tugged at his clothes. It's like this, my clothes are too dirty, and sleeping in them will dirty the bed. But if I want to take a shower, I don't have any change of clothes, so I want to ask Mr. Steve if he can lend me one. Of course. Steve agreed readily. Thanks. Lindsay said gratefully. Steve returned to his room and quickly brought out a hoodie and a pair of sweatpants and handed them to Lindsay. The bathroom is over here. Turn it on and there's hot water. Lindsay took the clothes, thanked Steve, and turned to walk towards the bathroom. By the way, Sarah, I'm going to go out and get some food. You and Paimon stay home and be safe. Also, don't open the door to strangers. Steve gave worried instructions before leaving. Lindsay opened the bathroom door and was startled to see the concern and worry in the man's eyes. What's going on? Steve suddenly gives me a sense of being a kind father. Lindsay blinked and threw away the messy thoughts in his mind, then replied to the other party. Okay, Mr. Steve. After getting the reply, Captain America went out. Lindsay took a hot shower in the bathroom for 10 minutes, changed his clothes, and walked out of the bathroom. Although Kong is not short, his height of 1.6 meters is not enough compared to Captain America, who is 1.91 meters tall. Moreover, MiHoYo's designs for the boys are basically leaning towards slenderness, so Sarah's gore, when wearing the clothes Steve gave him, looks a bit oversized. This made Lindsay feel a little helpless. Pata. There was the sound of keys turning, and Steve, who had been out, came back. He went to a nearby supermarket, picked up some fast food and ingredients, and then bought a large bucket of water and some hour. You're back, Mr. Steve. I'm back. I bought some vegetables and eggs, as well as milk for Paimon to drink when he wakes up. And these dishes, Sarah, take a look and make anything for lunch. I'm any with that. Steve was carrying the bag and hanging the keys on the hook in the entrance while talking. He looked up and was stunned for a moment. A single earring, amber eyes, long golden hair falling to the waist, fair skin, delicate facial features, and a large sweatshirt loosely covering the body. The boy rolled up the hem of his overly long trousers to his calves, revealing his smooth ankles. He is so handsome, like an exotic prince from a fairy tale. Because of taking a shower, the boy untied his pigtails and put them behind his head. Water droplets dripped down his hair onto his dark sweatshirt, leaving a wet spot there. If he hadn't seen the face, Steve would have almost thought he had walked into the wrong room. Lindsay noticed Steve's gaze and touched his hair in confusion, wondering why the other party was standing at the door and not coming in. "Oh, I couldn't empty the hair dryer, so I just left it on and waited for it to dry naturally." Steve looked away and put the shopping bag on the coffee table. Sarah, I'll take you and Paimon shopping for clothes after dinner. This matter was indeed an oversight on his part. He forgot the size difference between himself and Kong. And he couldn't always let the children wear ill-fitting clothes. He could use Sarah's clothes as an emergency measure, but as for Paimon, there was no way an adult like him could put his clothes on a little girl. Thinking of this, Steve opened a cabinet, took out a hair dryer, and started blowing the boy's hair. Lindsay did not refuse. His hands must have been sore from blowing such long hair by himself. Thanks. He lowered his head and said, "The captain is indeed a good man." Don't be so polite to me. Steve said with a smile. After drying his hair, he put down the hair dryer and smoothed the golden hair in his hands. It was very smooth and had the scent of gardenia. Steve was a good man and picked up the hairband that Sarah had placed on the table. He ran his fingers through the boy's hair, tied the messy hair tightly again, and combed it neatly for the boy. All right. Steve said, clapping his hands. Lindsay touched the big braid on the back of his head and gave Steve a thumbs up. "I didn't expect Mr. Steve could braid his hair, that's amazing." "Ah, I have acting experience before, and others taught me." He remembered that at that time he had just finished the super soldier experiment. He had a muscular body but was regarded as the mascot of the United States. He performed reports in the army. Everywhere, wearing funny clothes and small wing ears on his hat. Steve couldn't help but smile at the thought. Dun. There was a knock on the door. A woman was standing outside holding a basin full of clothes. She pressed close to the door and listened for a while. She knocked on the door and tentatively asked, "Steve, are you there?" Steve opened the door. "Kate." Hi, Steve. The woman looked a little embarrassed and pointed to the clothes in her hands. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask if I could use your washing machine. The one at my house just doesn't work for some reason." The visitor was Steve's neighbor Kate, who worked as a nurse in the city hospital. Steve would occasionally meet her when he went out, and the two would chat when they had nothing to do. Kate is very enthusiastic and kind, and helped Steve a lot when he moved in. Steve has a good impression of Kate. "Of course, please come in." Steve took the basin from Kate and ushered the woman into the house. Kate walked in and was a little surprised to see the boy sitting in the living room. "Oh. Sorry, I didn't know you had a guest. Actually, I can go to the laundry downstairs." Kate apologized hastily. "No, I'm Annie. Lindsay waved his hands hurriedly, "I'm just staying at Mr. Steve's house temporarily." You guys talk. Feeling like a light bulb, Lindsay hid in the room. Steve noticed the boy's awkwardness, but he didn't care. He asked the woman to sit anywhere and he took the clothes and put them in the washing machine. Kate didn't rest. She walked to the bathroom door and leaned against it, watching the man busying around, feeling apologetic and grateful. She was a little curious. "Is that kid your brother?" "No, he's just my friend." Steve put the clothes in place and pressed the wash button on the washing machine. "Okay, just wait a moment." "Thank you for your help." Kate said sheepishly, How about I buy you some coffee in return? Someone gave me a can of French coffee, maybe we can try it together." The woman's face was slightly hushed as she looked at Steve expectantly. Okay, no problem. Steve nodded in agreement. Really? That's great. Kate was very happy to hear the man's answer. She pointed outside and said to Steve, "I'll get it now. Wait for me. I'll be right back." She ran out with a smile on her face. It was not until Steve could no longer be seen that the curve at the corners of his mouth slowly disappeared, and his expression turned serious. Kate returned to her room, took out a can of coffee from the table, and took out her phone to dial. "Hey. Sir, number 13 reports to you." Kate's voice was cold and emotionless. Well, go ahead. A steady voice came from the other end of the line. The target person has been found and is currently at Captain Rogers' home. What should I do next? Please instruct /. Her body tensed. / Very good, continue monitoring / yes /. After hanging up the phone, Kate picked up the coffee, adjusted her expression, put on a bright smile, and walked toward Steve's house. Shield. Nick Fury, sitting in his office chair, put his phone on the table. He looked at the two blurry girls on the computer screen thoughtfully. Carlson, come to my office, he said, pressing a button on the table. A few minutes later, Carlson knocked on the door and walked in. Nick nodded to the man, asked him to sit down, and asked Carlson, how's Stark? / He's any. / Very good, / Nick frowned, looked at Carlson and asked, / Do you mean his injuries or his psychology? / Stark's injuries are not serious, they are basically superchill injuries, just some concussion, but his mentality, / Carlson said. You know, he was very sad when that child named Kikai died. It's such a pity. I met Kikai. She was a very obedient girl. Carlson sighed. He felt very sorry about this matter, but the key now was Stark's condition. If Stark could return to normal, their plan could proceed. It's a pity that we still haven't found out who killed Obadiah, otherwise we would know what happened at that time. Carlson said with a frown. He was very annoyed about this matter. If he had not thought it through at the beginning, Obadiah would never have been able to escape and cause such serious consequences. Fury nodded, but he did not tell Carlson about his discovery that the child who was suspected of killing Obadiah was now with Captain America. Things are complicated enough without too many people getting involved. Obadiah was killed. There was no video footage of the scene, but two children were found in the surveillance video of a neighborhood a few kilometers away from the scene. Fury was determined not to reveal any information to the outside world until everything was concluded. He looked up at Carlson and asked, when is Stark's press conference scheduled? Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Pay attention to the situation at the scene, maybe that person will show up. Fury said. Okay sir. After arranging the work, Carlson left and Fury rubbed his temple. Variables. Fury pondered and looked out the window. The sky was gloomy and it looked like it was going to rain. Lindsay slept very deeply and didn't know how long he slept. When he opened his eyes, he found that the whole room was dark. He paused in rubbing his eyes and sat up suddenly. He was supposed to cook, and it's so dark now. I don't think he will sleep until night. Traveler, is it evening yet? Paimon yawned loudly, climbed out of the bed, and rubbed his sleepy eyes. Lindsay opened the system and felt relieved only after seeing the time clearly. It had only been 2 hours since he fell asleep, and it was just noon, so it was just in time for lunch. He put on his shoes and opened the window, letting in a fresh, earthy breeze. Akiu. Paimon couldn't help but sneeze. It turned out to be raining, no wonder the light was so dim. Paimon, wake up. We still need to prepare lunch. Lindsay pulled Paimon out of bed and combed the girl's messy hair. After getting themselves ready, the two of them walked out of the house. There was no light in the house, and no one knew where Mr. Steve had gone. Even Miss Kate, whom he had met before, was gone. Lindsay didn't pay much attention. He opened the plastic bags in the refrigerator and on the table. There are a lot of ingredients in it. Traveler, what is this thing? This is a TV. There are many videos in it. It's a technological product similar to a video recorder. Do you want to watch it? Ah. Lindsay turned on the TV, and a female anchor appeared, reporting the news. Tony Stark will hold a press conference tomorrow to explain the explosion that occurred at his residence yesterday. Lindsay was silent for a while. He remembered that he seemed to have seen eggs among the ingredients Steve bought just now. Paimon, let me make some fried eggs for lunch today.